Well, today's guest may challenge one of the most sacred beliefs in strength culture that you need meat to build real muscle. Now, Torre Washington has spent decades proving that plants can actually fuel an elite physique. But this conversation is not a vegan commercial. We're going to ask the hard questions. Is vegan bodybuilding truly optimal? Is it just possible? And who should absolutely not do it without guidance? Welcome to the show, Torre Washington.
Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate this opportunity. I look forward to it.
Well, let's start by, I know there's countless times when you're in the gym or walking with that freaking buff body when someone looks at your physique and says, "Man, there ain't no way that body was built without meat." What do they misunderstand about this whole thing? Tell
You
us.
know, I gotta say, actually, what they say is, there's no way you did that without steroids.
Right. That was the other question.
And cause they don't, cause it's not like I walk around with vegan on my T-shirt all the time. So most of the time, it's the steroids. But then when I go into, well, I don't eat meat, they're baffled even by more. And then it goes from, wait, you don't eat any animals? Like no fish, no eggs? Like, no, they're like, oh, you gotta be using something, man. There's no way. And I'm like, hey, I've been doing this for over 30 years. So it must be something to it.
Was it always like that though?
Yeah, I was raised vegetarian. So my mom raised me vegetarian. She was a 7-day Adventist, and the lifestyle of a 7-day Adventist is to follow the health regimen that was provided by in the Bible, which is what they ate in the Garden of Eden, where, they had quote unquote dominion over animals, but they weren't told to eat animals. It was just eat all the fruit of the trees, and of the land. And so that's how they pretty much lived their life. And that's how I was raised. And so I was raised within that culture. And, it was simple transition for me to go to make sure that there were no eggs or milk in my food. And that was the next transition.
Wow, that's big time. Now, there was a guy back in the '80s who was a lacto ovo vegetarian or not or whatever he was, and it's Andreas Calling, but
I've heard of
they
him.
right? Remember? But they
Yeah.
still he still had meat products, not meat. So that was the closest ever to someone in the Olympic. You, my man, have a very interesting, segue into this whole process, and that was now you've been bodybuilding for the longest time. You got this veganism thing going on, but what? Tell us about your health and this whole identity. What drove you into bodybuilding? Since being a vegetarian was first and foremost.
Well, my whole bodybuilding journey came about. I think it was more so out of a way for me to kind of become the person that I kind of wanted to be in a sense, because when I left Alabama, I moved to Jamaica. I was born in Alabama. So I was born in Alabama, but then I moved to Jamaica. When I moved to Jamaica, not even knowing that I had an accent or how I sounded when I moved to Jamaica, I got picked on. Me and my brother got picked on. And so we got picked on in school, and I had no way to defend myself. So I just kind of kept my anger in, and my only outlet was cartoons, watching Wolverine and Superman and, the Transformers. And then I got into Arnold Schwarzenegger and seeing his movies and seeing his physique, Conan Barbarian, Commando, and all of these things. I actually started looking into his background, and I saw where he did bodybuilding, and I saw how it was able to create those physiques that I emulated or wanted to emulate, because I figured these guys, the superheroes, are so strong that people won't mess with them. You know what I mean? And so I said, all right, that's what I'm going to do. I just started doing whatever I could. In Jamaica, my granddad was an electrician. He had an iron block he used for soldering. And so I used to curl that little soldering iron. It was like 10 pounds. Started doing some crunches and little push ups here and there in Jamaica. And then when I moved from Jamaica back to the United States, I lived in South Florida. And when I got to South Florida, I was picked on again because now I sounded like an island kid, and there people were like, "Oh, you need to go back to the banana boat, man. Go on your banana boat." And I was like, "What?" I was like, "All right." So I just started really getting into. I asked my mom to purchase me a bodybuilding set, and she got a cheap weight bench and one dumbbell. And I used that one dumbbell and did one arm presses, one arm curls, did everything I could with that one dumbbell until I could get a membership at Gold's Gym, the iconic Gold's Gym on 44th Street and University, and started working out there. And I worked out there, and I worked out in high school. Once I got to high school, they had gym class, so I did all of that, and I started going to bodybuilding competitions and never really competed, but I just was reading the magazines. I was studying up on bodybuilding hardcore because I really, those were my superheroes. Those, because my father had left when I was 5 too. So I didn't have that. It was just all single parent and only for when I was with my grandparents, but I have double parents.
That's that's good. A lot of us, that's kind of how it started. You get picked on, you toughen up, and you think. I remember having on the back of a. Do you remember comic books on the back of a comic with Charles Atlas, and you could you could send.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Yes, 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 yes.
That was my first training. My training program was Charles Atlas. Because the guy got sand kicked in his face on the beach, and the other guy was bigger, so we decided to get bigger. I love that story. That's great, man. You don't look like you're from Alabama, but okay, that's fair enough.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. I go, I don't
Right,
see the
right?
Alabama. I see the
Yeah.
Rusty from Jamaica, but I don't see the
Yeah.
Alabama.
I don't know, man.
And
It's
you
like
know
that.
what? Hey, can you do the rest of the interview in that Jamaican accent? Because that was freaking
Yeah.
beautiful. When you said banana boat, I'm like, oh, I could listen to that all day.
I remember when I started doing it, the girls would be like, "Wait, you sound like that? You
Yeah.
need to talk like that all the time." I was like, "Oh, that's how you get them. Okay."
It's
That's
so
great,
funny. A
man.
guy I surf with out here, born and raised in Jamaica, but he's a white guy. But his I think his either his father or mother are black, but he must have imported all the white roots because he looks like just a white guy from Southern California. But he's
Mm,
born and raised in Jamaica, so he speaks the native
Yeah.
language. So he'll
Yeah.
be walking down in places where, and they'll start speaking to them in Pawan. Is Padawan?
patois,
Padawan.
patois.
They'll start speaking to him. He'll hear that in the background, and they're just giving the guy shit, and he just turns on him and speaks it and comes after him. And he was born in the streets of Jamaica, and they look at him like there's no way. And then when he turns on that Jamaican accent, oh my God, it's hilarious. But yeah, and he can just and he speak and we'll go down to restaurants now. They're Jamaican, and he'll walk back to the cook and start speaking with them, and all of a sudden the food comes out different. And we get better. We get better food. It's
Hey,
phenomenal.
Tori, let me ask you, when you started in a gym and when people, said that you wanted to build this pro level physique, did you always have this vision of being on stage and
You
bodybuilding?
know, so I think when I started to read the magazines and go into the shows, I was inspired by them, and I said, "Yeah, I definitely want to compete." But got into doing track and field in high school around my junior year, and I started, hanging out with the people that go out a lot. I was doing a lot of partying and starting to get noticed because I was one of those. Since I was already picked on, I started hanging with a crowd when I was younger that were the Marilyn Manson crowd. You remember
Yeah,
Marilyn Manson?
I listen to
Yeah, so
Marilyn Man.
yeah, so
Yeah,
I listened to Marilyn Manson. I was in the headbanger crowd. I was a
yeah,
white boy. I hung out with all the white boys with long hair. We played guitars, wore the boots and the tight jeans and I didn't
makeup.
know how to. I didn't know
Come
how
on,
to.
no makeup.
I was more the thrasher. I was more the Metallica Megadeth kind of guy, the
There
Iron
we go.
Maiden.
All
There you
right.
go. Oh,
I was into the Anthrax and all
oh,
of that,
I
the
love them. Yeah,
GRI.
yeah.
Yeah, man, Testament, you name it. But I couldn't go to the concerts. because
No,
I get beat up.
no,
Because, back then skinheads was huge. Skinheads and the whole thing. And I was like, man, if I go, these kids ain't gonna protect me. And this was gonna be me fighting all these skinheads.
no
I
mosh
couldn't go
pit.
and yeah, I couldn't go to join the mosh pits and do all of that stuff because I knew what would happen if I went.
Oh
It would
yeah,
have
you'd
been
be
like
thrown
you'd be like,
back
well,
out.
why am I keep getting hit? Like, I don't understand. So so I didn't do that. So I just worked out and hung out with these kids and went to see movies. And I really was kind of a loner in a sense. And once I started running track and then I started playing American football. American football is where I injured my knee. And I didn't know what I did to it, but I just knew that it felt like something was really bad. I went to the hospital. All they did was do an x-ray and said, oh, you just pulled a tendon. And I was like, oh, okay. But turned out years later that it was my ACL. I had tore it and it healed improperly, but then I eventually got the surgery done in 2010. So throughout this time, I had always wanted to bodybuild. And one of my friends in middle school, he actually dropped out to bodybuild. And I don't know if to this day where he is. I attempted to look him up because they used to call us Sean Ray and Lou Ferrigno back in the day because of the difference, the way we look. I had a little flat top like Sean Ray, and he looked like Lou Ferrigno. But I never competed until I got out of college and I started working in corporate America as an engineer. And one of my friends said one of our closest friends was competing in Georgia, and I was living in Alabama at the time. And I went to see his bodybuilding show. Man, I tell you, when I saw him on stage, it really inspired me to say, you know what? I don't want to go to the end of my life and say, I wish I did or would have or should have. And I said, I need to at least do it once because I've always wanted to do it. Let me go do it once. And I talked to him and I said, hey, man, because he looked like the action figures, the superheroes. Because I thought I looked good because, I was an avid gym goer. But seeing that definition up close and the shape of the muscles and the abs, I was like, what? Oh, man. Okay. I want to look like that. And I told him, I said, I want to compete. He said, but you're vegan. I was like, man, I don't, okay. I didn't think that had anything. No one thought being vegan could help you get there. And so we started doing it. And I did my first show 2009 in April and got third place.
Nice. Okay, I mean, I'm sure everybody's going to be asking me, yelling it at their phones or their YouTube about this. Where does your protein actually come from? And it's always said that vegans are lacking certain amino acids. I mean, can you tell us what's going on here?
I always thought that was crazy because I think at one point it was not such a big deal. It had finally got to that point where I felt like, all right, we made a breakthrough. No one's asking that question anymore. Because I think around 2017, 2018, that movie, What the Health, came out. I don't know if you
Yeah.
remember that documentary.
Yes.
Everybody went vegan after that. It was like, oh, okay. And I was like, oh, whew, all right, we made some breakthrough. But now it's back. And I'm getting that question again, like, where do you get your protein? How do you get enough protein? It's the funny part about it, Doc, is even when I started, I didn't even think about protein. I was just eating food, making sure I was just eating enough. And then when I wanted to get lean, I ate less. And I didn't track my protein amount. And then when I look back at it, my protein amount was between 50 to 100 grams a day. And I was winning shows, looking good. I have good genetics. I have an elite structure, which helps me. But I also have a great work ethic when it comes to training. I'm very much focused on performance and efficient movement and preventing of injury. That was my thing. And so once I decided to hire a coach because I wanted to get to even higher level, and the higher level meaning I wanted to see if I could compete within the organization that Arnold Schwarzenegger competed in and all the top bodybuilders, the IFBB Pro League. So so you had to go to the NPC. And I got into the NPC and started winning shows there. And I was like, well, okay, I guess I can do it here too. Hired a coach 2017, 18, and his protocol changed to where he wanted me to increase my protein amount to inhibit or prohibit muscle loss as we go in a caloric deficit to get on stage, to look more full and shredded, right? I was always shredded. And I remember him telling me, he said, I always saw you at these shows looking fantastic. He said, just imagine, I was always imagining Tori as if he carved up and got more full, he would just be killing it. That's what he said to me. But I was still doing well, killing shows. And so how I increased it, I just get my protein, because I was getting my protein from what was around at that time was tofu. I've eaten tofu pretty much all my life. My mom raised us on, like I said, the vegetarian. We had soy from the beginning. So it was nothing new to me. It was just making tofu differently. I didn't really do shakes as much. I do shakes more now, but back then I didn't. I did more tofu and tofu products, soy products, because those were the most popular things that was available at the time for vegans or vegetarians. And beans, but beans, of course, they have protein, but they're more heavier on the carbohydrate end. And once I started to track for my competitions, I stuck to your tofu and your tempeh, and then I started finding about seitan, which is vital wheat gluten, which is very, very high in protein. And those are the things that I started with. And then now you have a new type of tofu, which is a soy-free tofu for those who are scared of soy. It's called fava bean tofu, which is just protein. There's no carbs, there's no fat. It just has a tofu texture, but there's not necessarily it's not soy. So, and that's one of my favorite ones to go to as well.
Torre, what is a typical, you're not, well, when you're not training for a competition, like most listeners and viewers, what does a typical day of eating look like? Breakfast, lunch, and dinner?
And I'll say this: I'm not typical when it comes to doing anything. I've always kind of prided myself on being different. And that's even from the music that I listen to how I dress and how I look and how I deal with things. But because I get this question a lot, and like I'll say for example, for today, like, or even yesterday. Yesterday I had seitan chunks, which is kind of a meaty texture, and I had 2 servings of that, which gets about 32 grams of protein. Then I had this. One of my clients makes these buns she makes them from fava bean tofu and seitan. She makes it together, and they look like they look like biscuits, but they're a little bit more dense. So one of those has 46 grams of protein. So I have that. I had the chunks. I had some almond butter slapped on top of it with some organic maple syrup and a protein shake. So within 2 hours, I had
Starving now.
142 grams of protein, and that's almost in one meal. That could be breakfast. What happens, Spencer, when I'm not competing, but when I'm in competition, I am competing. But when I'm in competition mode, I tend to go to sleep hungry and wake up ready to eat. And so I'll eat so much in the first meal that my next 2, 3 meals are not as heavy, but just because I wanted to get my protein started off on a high note. Because for the day now, my protein is about 185 grams. And so,
Okay, that is excellent. The idea of going to bed hungry, which most people don't, most of America goes to bed because their biggest meal of the day is dinner, right?
Right.
So how many hours when do you stop eating, and when do you go to bed, and how many hours do you sleep?
So I know, especially now, when it's really crucial. I'm 16 weeks out from the Mr. Olympia. Sleep is so important, and my goal is 8 hours. I'm average about 7, but my goal is to get 7 to 9. So and I usually like to finish eating 6 or 8 p.m. That way I have a lot more time prior to actually laying down to have a better recovery and sleep during the night, because I know if I sleep after I've eaten kind of late, the sleep is different. It's weird how it's different. And I like to be in bed no later than 10:30, 9:30 is my best opportunity to do it, because I typically have clients in the morning around 6:15, but that's changed a lot during the summer. But those are my typical times to finish. And then like I said, that breakfast I told you about, my lunch may be a shake, or my lunch may be a serving of veggies with Japanese sweet potato and some seitan chunks or some tofu. And then dinner would be kind of similar. And, like I said, I like to keep the protein high so that I can enjoy my carbs more around my workout timing before or after my workout.
When do you work out?
So my workouts typically come in around usually this time of day till about 3 p.m. So that's usually the window of my workout schedule because of that's typically the break I have between clients. I have clients in the morning and then clients in the evening.
Mm.
Good. Go ahead, Terry. Sorry.
You know, you brought up a lot of stuff, and one of them was when the documentary came out, everybody wanted to jump on the vegan wagon. And then, I mean, you've been a vegan for your whole life. And so what do you see when people hear like this show or hear this, where do you see the biggest mistakes that vegans make when they first jump in to try and gain muscle, and to get the calories and all that? Are they eating too much processed food? Are they not enough strength training? If they want to gain weight, what are the
Well, I'll say this. You said a couple of things there that I think causes people to, there's a lot of misconceptions, right? When it comes to the lifestyle. One of them is most people love labels because labels kind of put things in a box and now you can like, oh, they're supposed to do it this way. I hate labels, but I understand that you got to use them in order to get 85% of the population to understand what's going on. So when, for example, I work with Chris Hemsworth, who plays Thor in the Avengers. And I remember we were talking about him being vegan for Thor Ragnarok. And he said, man, I was just bloated all the time. I couldn't really, get my stomach down. And I basically was saying to him, the one thing about society is if someone tells you that this is the way it's supposed to be or this is the way it's not supposed to be, and if it trends, people follow it versus how their body responds. He decided to jump in and do it, get whole foods, all the veggies and the beans and things like that. Because one thing you said, Dr. Terry, is a lot of times people say, oh, it's process. Everything that we do, we breathe is processed. You're breathing processed air right now and sitting inside an office. You're not outside. It's still processed outside as well because we have an environment that has many different manufactories around the world pumping out different gases into the oxygen. So you have clothing that's been processed. It's processed and put on you. You wear it on top of your skin. The oils, the lotions, the sunscreens, process. And then we say, oh, man, that's too processed food. Don't do that. Tofu is literally edamame crushed with calcium carbonate to be coagulated and pressed into firm blocks. Okay. A lot of times people look at that like that's a processed food. Or they look at the Gardein that someone takes a texturized soy protein, makes it look similar to chicken, breads it, fry it in some oil, put it back in the freezer, and then you buy it. Yeah, it's convenient. And people say, oh, it's a lot of process. But the slab of beef you get gets injected, put over there, hung up, they put some red dye on it, slap a label on it, wrap it up. It's processed, minimally processed, as they say, but it's still processed. So I think the scary part is, or the misconceptions is, everything you do in vegan in order to put on muscle, you have to eat all this processed foods. Everybody else is too. And so the other part is you have to take all these supplements. The only supplements I consume are creatine and protein and an herbal hormone optimizer, which is just to kind of balance my hormones because I'm older and keeping the cortisol level lower and things like that. So I think the mistakes that most people make is they jump in with this complex idea of the lifestyle when it's really just most people eat meat, veggies, starch, right? Let's say, for example. And if you're not going to have meat, you still have the starches and you have your veggies. The other part is, like I saw a video one of my friends made that she says peanut butter is not a source of protein. Her reason for saying that was because peanut butter has 6 grams of protein, 17 grams of fat, 8 grams of carbs. It's a source of fat. it's a source of all three. It just so happens that fat is the higher number. When it comes to protein intake, everybody has a different number that they need based on what they're doing. Me as an elite bodybuilding athlete, my goal is to build, recover muscle as much as possible and maximize fat loss. Whereas someone else may need much more energy, much more fat within in their lifestyle in order to run a marathon per se, or to do a high rocks, or to do some CrossFit, or things of like nature. They have a different requirement because I'm not expending energy through an hour activity. I'm just on stage basically modeling for some judges downstairs with some oil on me so they can say, hey, he looks good. We don't know if he's active or he can jump, but he looks good. So it's a different thing altogether. And I think people make those mistakes based on what someone else's opinions or someone else's experience versus having an experience of their own. And so that's why I always tell people that you can't say that it'll happen to you the same way it happens to me. Like, you can eat whatever I eat. You may not have the same results. You might have to do it differently. And I think this what makes a lot of people that I know, they kind of, they can fly with me because they know I'm not going to judge them on what they're doing. I'm going to give them suggestions, but you have to see what works for your body versus what someone else is telling you to do, because they don't know. You're the one and only Dr. Terry. You're the one and only Dr. Spencer Barron. There's no one else like you. Even if they clone you, there's no one else like you. You know what I mean? So you just have to see what truly works for you.
Spencer, I love the way this guy is articulating everything and explaining things.
Agreed.
Oh my gosh, you're so articulate in how you explain things. But you mentioned something when you were talking to Chris Hemsworth about that everybody's not put in a box, right? And you hate that. So when people are watching this, do you think vegetarian or vegan is good for everyone?
Mm. Yeah, that's a good question. Because I will say this, I know a lot of times people go into the lifestyle for these specific main reasons: health, environment, and for the animals. And when I realized that I'm a quote unquote vegan, I didn't really do that based on any of those. It was more out of the integrity of a lifestyle that I chose. So I chose to become Rasta. And Rastafari is the Ital lifestyle where everything vital is Ital. And it's all about living off the land, like the Rastaman them in the jungles of Jamaica. They kind of just they live and eat from the earth. And so I was like, well, if I'm gonna call myself a Rasta, I don't want to see myself eating chicken and fish and eggs and those kind of things. And so I was like, I'm gonna make sure that I eat all ital food from the earth, fruits, veggies. And then later on in life, somebody was like, "Oh, you sound like a vegan." I was like, What is vegan?" And that's when I realized the food eating method. But I never understood how vegan entailed what you wear, animal rights, this, that, and the other. And I can say that. Do I think it's for everybody? No. I feel like you have to make the decision based on what experience and what happens to your body. It's crazy to feel like people want to tell you, oh, everybody has to be blah blah blah. But I think one of my goals is to have people look at it not as this extreme way of doing things, because now we have so many extremes. You know, Vegan got popular, and then next thing you know, carnivore got popular. And now it's like, wait, do I do carnivore or do I do a mix of both? So it's just having people just so confused they don't know what to do. So I will say, Dr. Terry, I don't think it's for everyone.
So you mentioned something. You're born vegetarian because of the faith that you were born into, and then you went to Jamaica and you discovered Rasta, which had a very similar background. So where does your vegan come from? From Seventh Day Adventist or from Rasta or a combination of both?
I think a combination of both, but it more came out of Rasta, because I also got to say that I wasn't too fascinated with the religious aspect of either. right? When it came to the Seventh-day Adventist aspect, once I questioned the religious aspect a lot, but I identified with the nutritional aspect. And then when it came to Rasta, it started out religious because some people use religion in order for them to be given some leeway with certain things. Like you could say, "Oh, it's my religious belief for me to do such and such," and like, "Oh, okay, well, we can't attack your religion." But for me, it was more of a lifestyle, and so the lifestyle on their nutritional habits, because Rasta, any man can say that Rasta don't grow some lax, smoke some ganja, listen to some reggae, and say, "Jah Rastafari Selassie." Oh, he's a Rasta. No, but that's how it is. So my vegan lifestyle came more out of the Rasta because Rasta kind of leans really more into the peace and love and oneness with all and with our nutrition as well. But the vegans take it even further with the whole animal rights, where Rasta really didn't really, because in Jamaica animals was treated like, you know, not like, hey, come sleep in the bed with me. That's not how Jamaicans saw animals. And then if you look back at slavery, animals were treated better than the slaves. And so slaves not gonna be like, why am I gonna fight for this animal, but nobody fought for me? You know what I mean? And so that's where a lot of things kind of part ways. But for me, the lifestyle came more because of the Rastafari side.
You can't talk about your Rasta past without going to the accent, can you?
It is hilarious. Yeah, did you notice that? I love that.
I mean, your life speaks two languages, and you just went boom, 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 boom. That's so awesome.
He starts out sounding like a guy from Alabama, and then all of a sudden,
and then he's South Florida, and then he's Jamaica, and it's all the same person.
Yeah, the moment he started the word Rasta, his dialect changed.
Right, totally.
That was great. Oh man, I'm glad he's not from China or anything. He started breaking out. Oh, very good, very good. Anyway.
はい、そうですね。私がJapanese ですね. I speak Japanese too.
Right on. Oh, that's so funny, man. All right, so that was great. All right, so let me ask you about things that you do track, such as, there's calories, macros, blood work, digestion, recoveries, sleep, inflammation, things like that. What, based on you as a competitor or someone who's so conscientious about health and wellness, what do you track? What do you bother track? What would you like to track?
So I really hadn't gotten into tracking
Hmm.
things like that. I just only tracked my macros. But
Yeah.
the other day I was like, I wonder what my testosterone is. I would love to know, because here I am still building muscle at the age that people are like, how are you still growing? And wait, you're not eating any meat, so I don't understand. So I was like, yeah, let me check. And so I checked it. It was like 6 something. And I was like,
Good.
I was thinking it was gonna be higher. I was hoping it would be higher. But because I hear that it has to be in the thousands in order for you to really grow, to really get big. And because a lot of the guys that I know that are taking, steroids, they're because of taking steroids, they're like at 1700, they're way up there, and the muscle protein synthesis is out the roof. But they're also losing their hair and acting crazy. And you're like, whoa, you all right, man? Like, dude. And then when they come off of it, it's like, oh, so it was that. I was wondering why you acting like that.
Yeah.
But anyways, and so then I had that checked and everything else. They were like, oh, everything's good. The only thing that was high is your phosphorus, which is, I think they said is normal because of the amount of greens you consume. So. And I was like, all right. And so then I did it again for a second time and my testosterone increased. And I was like, oh, that's good. That's good to see. And everything else was great. So I've been thinking of doing it again, just to see and get probably more checked out, just to see. But, I'm not really I never really took the liberty to really pay attention to that so much because I always just liked knowing how I felt versus looking at a number when I know it's just a snapshot at that moment and it probably could change tomorrow, so it was just kind of interesting to see it. But I'm glad I kind of have done it because I still get the accusations and I've been waiting for an opportunity to really share it. Like, I can't be taking drugs, having testosterone at six something. You guys, I should be way up there because they assume that I have to be on TRT or something because of my age and the type of food I eat.
How old? Yeah, I was just to say, how old are you? Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'll be 52 in August.
No
shit.
shit. All right. So I was on your Instagram yesterday, and I'm like, you're at the biggest stages of the world. You're competing in the Arnold Classics, Mr. Universe. I mean, you're at the biggest stages, and you're 52. I mean, what is the closest age to you that you compete with? I mean, it's got to be in the 30s because it takes a long time to get to your level. But
yeah,
you're
I
50.
would say,
Fuck.
yeah, no, man. I remember I did a podcast. Was it a podcast? Yeah, it was like a podcast type of event where they were like natural versus unnatural. And when I walked on to the set, the natural guys were like, "You're natural?" I was like, "Yeah." They're like, "Damn, I need to do something different." And then the guys that were not natural, one of them was 57, but he didn't know my age. And he was saying that he was taking because of, naturally getting older. He feels like he need to take something. Then when I said my age, he was like, I I guess I can't have that argument anymore because I'm thinking age and you're younger than me, but still in your 50s and you don't look like, and he didn't look, I was like, what are you taking? Because you guys y'all don't look bigger than me at all. Or not even more defined. The only guy that really looked like he was taking drugs was a competitive bodybuilder. And everybody else was just like, y'all might as well just say you're natural because I would hate to know you're using and you look like that. But for the most part, Dr. Terry, yeah, most of them, I think most guys are 32, 25 years old on stage with me.
Do you ever, when they find out and when you beat them and they find out how old you are, are they disappointed because you're the young buck, or are they in awe?
They're in awe, but I know somewhere they're like, what the? Deep down, they kind of looking at it. And the fact that I'm natural, I know it's even more so like, wow, this guy's natural, older than me, and he just beat me.
So are you competing? This is Spencer's world, not mine. Are you competing as natural? Are you competing against guys that take steroids? So you are. There's no definition. There's no division for natural versus synthetic. So you're beating almost everybody that's probably taken something, and you're natural, vegan, 52, and you're kicking their ass.
Yeah.
That's so freaking awesome. Sorry,
isn't that tremendous?
That's just so freaking awesome.
No, I was gonna. In retrospect, I was gonna mention. This is also for the audience. We had a couple females that are talking about women's health, and it was interesting. One of them was a real advocate for the Aura ring that everybody's wearing and tracking all their everything, heart rate variability and all the things that you probably don't even bother with. But, they did make a comment, and I commend you on your ability to have a perception of what is going on in your system, whether it's good or bad. You have that instinct that everybody's been, checking their, what they are, whatever they're tracking, and they're losing that sense of feeling whether they're right or wrong. They have to look at their phone and go, oh, I slept well last night, or oh, I slept like shit last night, not realizing maybe you did sleep well, but you're looking at something that's taken the place of instinct, what you feel. That's one. Two is just for the listening audience, your testosterone levels. I've been explaining to patients, when you do a blood draw, it's a snapshot of that day, that moment, that time. Whereas for those out there that are curious, and this may be why, our testosterone, men and women, they fluctuate throughout the day. So there's some tests out there, a kit you can get on your own that is a saliva test. You do it at 4 different times of the day, and it'll give you the feedback that you're curious about that would help with, what's the best time of the day to train, at least for that time of the year or what have you. Or when's the best time or the time that's the least appropriate time to train based on your hormone fluctuations. So it's a pretty cool, that's more what I call a movie instead of a snapshot. So, just a thought. We'll talk about that
I like
later
that.
on. Yeah. It's a lot easier. You swab the mouth with this cotton swab, and then you shove it in a test tube, and they have you do it at 4 different times of the day, and then you send it off to the lab.
So
Just a
what
thought.
I'm curious, when somebody's backstage and they find that you're natural and whether it's from Rasta or the lifestyle or whatever, what's the question that you get asked every time that you're almost sick of answering that we can put out in the show and to try and calm it down? What is a question you get asked all the time, and how do you answer it?
And what accent do you use? No, I'm kidding.
I want to hear the Rasta one.
Yeah, I'll hear either one. Depends on the question, I think.
Oh man, it's gonna be a toss up between what's your stack or where do you get your protein? And the I was talking to a friend in the gym, and he had a client, and his client was using, and his client just assumed because I'm in the IFBB and I compete along his coach. I said something. He was like, wait, you're natural? I was like, yeah. And then his coach was like, yeah, man, that's his thing. And he just dropped his weights, walked around the gym like, no way. I felt like he was disappointed that in how he looked and how I looked, and he was not natural and I was. So I've been getting that a lot lately. And then like I told you, Dr. Terry, the protein one has been coming back. That is probably the one I find the most arduous to answer. Oh gosh, again? Like sometimes I want to say, do I look like I'm not getting enough protein? Clearly I can get protein, and clearly there's protein in everything that we eat. Just the amount that you're looking at based on one specific source, because you can eat your chicken or your turkey and get protein without fat per se, and I have to get protein with carbs. I just have to be, conscious and choosy of which source I want to go with, and like I mentioned to you, if I go with the fava bean protein source, and that's just straight protein, or I can do seitan, which has no fat but has carbs, but it's higher protein, so it's just different routes to take. I think as much as people research and look on their phones, it's funny when they come face to face with someone else who doesn't eat like them, and they're like, how do you get your protein? You can Google it. You find many sources of protein there. So that's probably the main one, Dr. Terry.
All right, I got another question for you. I think so. What's your question? What's your thoughts on this? I think when you have people taking stacking or taking substances, maybe they're looking for a cheat code to get bigger. And
Yes.
you grew up in a rough time. You grew up. I would assume your work ethic is probably stronger than 90% of the people that you work out in the gym. You have to be. So, do you find as a natural vegan, you're the size you are due to your discipline and your work ethic, and because you grew up in where you had to prove yourself, a tough attitude, a tough all that, where some people may grow up with a little easier and they're just used to, you know what, I'm only gonna work out an hour today, but I'm gonna juice up so it looks like I work out 3 hours.
Right.
Do you feel that most of your success is due to your work ethic or due to your protein intake?
Definitely my work ethic, because I've been training like this, and like I said, I used to study these guys on how to lift properly, and I would just get the magazine and just read them, read them, and I got Arnold Schwarzenegger's book and studied it, because I didn't really, like I said, in the beginning, I wasn't hyper focused on, okay, how much protein am I getting today? I was just eating the food that I knew to eat that was vegan, and making sure I ate enough and drank enough water and slept good. My training was just, I used to always tell people, like, training intensity is so important, but most people don't train with intensity. They just want to move weights. And I see it in the gym when I'm helping clients. And I see other people working out, and Spencer, I have to stop and be like, can I help you real quick? What muscle are you training? And they'd be like, oh, I'm training this. Okay. So if you can just hold it like this and do this a little bit, you'll get this feel right here. And they're like, oh my gosh. Like, yeah, yeah, that's how you train that. So
Yeah.
it's really, I'm very particular on training with the technique, the biomechanics. And yes, of course, there's times when you throw weight around, but it's I feel like my work ethic is really, really has gotten me to where I am. Plus, with good genetics, a good symmetry, a good proportion. I was very particular about making sure that I train symmetrically to make sure that the muscles they're not so different from one side to the other. So I was very big on that too.
Tori, you mentioned some of the movies that you watched as a young kid growing up and all the Arnold movies where he was just a monster. But Tori, you didn't mention pumping iron.
I know.
What the heck, man? That is my ex-wife would turn to me and go, "Why are you making your kids watch that?" No, this is a cult
Bible.
movie. They gotta watch. They gotta watch Pumping Iron and the Three Stooges. Period. That's it.
And I enjoy pump iron. I think I enjoy pump iron more now because of when I understood that, Arnold had to play the villain,
Yes.
because they attempted to make Lou the villain, but he was too nice of a guy, and he had a disability, and they're like, all right, well, Arnold, I guess it has to be you.
Right. Torre Washington, thank you for being on our show, man. It was nothing less than inspiring. It was great.